Thank you so much for this wonderful invitation to be with you here today. Thank you for the gifts that your congregation has given to our organization, Minnesota Interfaith Power and Light. Especially thanks to Johanna Frisbee and Michael May, Josh Colton, Liz Denicky, who've been, as you're part of your green team, been working hard on issues that our organization works on. Among Episcopal congregations, you all have a reputation of being smart, bright, erudite people. I've prepared a manuscript sermon along those lines, so hopefully that will suit. And if you get bored, just maybe meditate on hymn 398 there that we sang. What a lovely, lovely hymn. 380 years ago, this September, almost to this very day, Oliver Cromwell and his forces encircled the royalist stronghold of Chester, England, beginning a siege that would last 16 months and end with Charles I fleeing and ultimately being beheaded. If you don't know the names of Cromwell and Charles and are not familiar with the English Civil War that raged through the 1600s, you would certainly be forgiven, even as good Episcopalian descendants of the Church of England. But seminarians are all taught that this time is a vital crux of Christianity, when the agreements between simple Protestant everyman spirituality and ornate Catholic traditional hierarchy were being hammered out in brutal battles whose conclusions were writ in the blood of the slain. Here is when the Church made peace with the Enlightenment and began to absorb the individualistic democratic ideals it fostered. Our gospel episode today has been one of the most important of the recent 40 years, or 50 or 60. It has informed the Church's key issue of our generation: who gets to be in, who is left out. And the longer you've been in the Church, the more likely you are to have heard an interpretation of this gospel story of the Syrophoenician woman as a lesson to draw that circle larger. Jesus, a Jewish rabbi, is confronted by a Gentile woman. He envisions that the circle is his own tribe, and she asks him to see the circle as larger. He uses a metaphor about children and dogs, by some accounts maybe racist. She cleverly accepts his metaphor and uses it to widen his consciousness. She invites him to see her not with tribal lenses, but as a fellow human, and in doing so, to see his calling not simply to his Hebrew tribe, but to the whole world. This good news, along with other scriptural insights, such as the letter by James today, has led the Church to repent of treating some people as second or third class members or outcasts. It has led the Church not just to embrace all people, but to actually become a community of all people. It has sparked the Church to examine its white supremacy and its cisgendered patriarchy, and to renew and aim for and practice the beloved community. Many people have prayed and worked and suffered over years, some of you in this room, so that this good news could be cracked open for the Church. And for those saints and souls who did that cracking, we give hearty thanks. But our understanding of the circle is still too small. That's because since the days of Cromwell, the circle has had nothing but humans in it. Technically, the creation and the non-human world has certainly been there, but we have acted as if it were merely the painted backdrops to a drama that is all only human. And that drama, since Cromwell and Charles, has been exponential human flourishing. Advanced health care, better medicine, refrigeration, abundant food distribution, transportation to the ends of the earth, lavish leisure, more convenience and more stuff, libraries of information at our fingertips. But these results have also come with costs, because the way we've gotten those results is an extractive economy that sucks more and more and more out of the earth while giving back ever larger mountains of pollution and ever more concentrated toxicity. Since King Charles was born, the earth has seen extinction of or dire threat to 30% of its species. And the current rate of global biodiversity extinction is 100 to 1,000 times greater than the background naturally occurring extinction rate. Digging up and burning oil and coal and gas has been foundational to the Industrial Revolution and the digital age and the human flourishing that those have brought. But it has also packed our atmosphere with more heat-trapping carbon than the Earth has seen for 650,000 years. And at best, we've been around for 300,000. The hotter atmosphere, as many of us know, are acidifying oceans, melting ice caps, creating epic droughts in some places, 100-year floods every 10 years in others. It's supercharged storms and hurricanes. It's caused deadly heat waves from Seattle to Phoenix, Paris to Karachi, and threatens to crash the global insurance economy. Last summer, Canadian wildfires burned so much forest that the wildfires themselves were the third largest global emitter of carbon, just behind the United States. And this unfolding wave of ecological destruction has a human cost also. And the caustic irony is that the people who have contributed least to climate change usually have the fewest resources to respond to the difficult consequences. In 2022, 32 million people were directly displaced by climate change-related disasters, 41% increase over 2008 numbers. Because carbon fuels have been so embedded, and still are embedded, in the economic structures of the world, the wealthier a person is, the more likely they are to be causing the catastrophe those fossil fuels are creating. In the shadow of this crisis, how do we draw that circle larger? How do we draw it as large as the true gospel? How do we draw it to include all creation? And what is the church, you and I, specifically called to do? First, the church can recover the theology of creation that is present in our good news and preach it and teach it, like you were doing here today and these next several Sundays, and like you've done in other situations. Those scriptures show that God's passionate love for creation. They show that we are called to be stewards of the earth. They show how humans belong to the earth and that we are called to freely share its abundance. Second, we can listen to other traditions that complement our wisdom. You are doing that in things like your land acknowledgement. Bishop Loya has spoken eloquently about this, repudiating the doctrine of discovery and repenting the damage that our church participated in during the founding of our nation and the settlement of these lands we call Minnesota. Anishinaabe and Dakota teachings tell us we are not only stewards of creation, but we are creation. We are members of a family, and we treat the earth like our grandmother. Third, we can align our lives and actions with creation. Going into nature, celebrating it, relishing it, that's good, isn't it? Hunting, fishing, swimming, hiking, birding, gardening, cooking, eating. I love to eat. Don't you love to eat good food? That's a great way to celebrate and abide in creation. And we also need to look at our choices and how those impact creation. How are we dependent upon burning fossil fuels? And how can we cut back? And where can we choose other options? How can we simplify our lives? Do we really need all that stuff that we have and that we buy? Can we extricate ourselves from desecrating practices such as factory feedlot farming and industrial monocropping, and single-use plastics. And fourth, we have to stand up against the structures that perpetuate the violence and destruction of creation. Eating vegetarian and driving an electric vehicle is good, but it won't be enough. Our systems of wealth are built on carbon fuels, and so carbon fuel industry has and will continue to do everything it can to keep burning and polluting. Exxon, for instance, has known since 1982 the reality of fossil fuel-driven climate change, but they sowed doubt for decades instead of changing their business model. Citibank, JP Morgan, Wells Fargo, and many other financial institutions continue to pour billions of dollars into financing fossil fuels. It makes sense because the carbon fuel industry enjoys $1 trillion of subsidies every year. We must invest in and vote for what supports and aligns with creation. We, the church, are going to have to stand up and call out society's addiction, our own addiction, and society's addiction, and shake the pillars of our government and our economy. Otherwise, the church will find itself merely a chaplain to the status quo, which is the continued burning of the planet. I cannot say how important to Christianity that war between Charles and Cromwell was. I'm not a scholar. I do know a little bit about that town of Chester because I visited there in 2006. It was a favorite of Charles because of the massive walls around the city that were started by the Romans in 103 CE. They'd become, by Charles's time, 12 feet thick and equally as high. And outside those walls on the south side of the city stands the hulking Church of St. John the Baptist, which Cromwell's army turned into an artillery position. Built in the 11th century, it is a magnificent feat of architecture and stone masonry, a great stone box, supported by a dozen columns the size of grain silos. And all around this sacred box, over the centuries, from the 12th, 13th, 14th, 15th centuries, the more delicate walls and chapels of the Gothic age were erected with their stained glass and fluted pilasters and arches. But these sections stand crumbling in partial remains and ruins now, open to the sky like lonely sculptures in a grassy park. And I will tell you what I learned. It was not the king's artillery firing from the great Roman walls that destroyed that church, but it was Cromwell's own artillery set up on the pyramids and tower of the church, constantly firing at Chester, the city, for 16 months. The vibrations of that constant firing slowly vibrating and crumbling those walls and edifices. It was Cromwell's own attacks that collapsed the church he stood on. But what really caught my attention, and what struck me to the core on that fine summer day, what gave me hope that I will never forget, was the soil that had accumulated in the nooks and crannies of those crumbling walls, the soil that had built up for 300 years after that siege, soil on the tops of walls, soil in the cracks of broken arches, like planter pots in the holes of the missing bricks, and the flowers that had sprouted there, carried by the wind, dropped and fertilized by the birds, the snapdragons and the poppies and the cosmos and other flowers I don't know the names of. Flowers, their hands and faces to the sun, waving, apparently wholly comfortable in God's love and confident that it was their church.